want none! You don't want none!
What's going on, Tar Heel Nation? It is your favorite North Carolinian, Russ the Tar Heel. And in this huddle, baby, I'm going to continue this fun series of giving an honest prediction of the University of North Carolina's Rivals 2024 football schedule. As some of you already know, I made a video already predicting the NC State Wolfpack's 2024 football campaign. So go check that out if you haven't already. And now we'll be talking about those puke Blue Devils out of Durham. But first, a little backstory. Manny Diaz takes the reins at Duke after Mike Elko heads for greener pastures and takes the head coaching job at Texas A&M. I think everybody knows that Duke is not a place where you're going to stinking hang your hat, if you will. Elko was famous as quoting that he was going to be in Durham longer than Mac Brown was in Chapel Hill, and we kind of saw how that all played out. Now, Malik Murphy is a capable quarterback who was a high four-star guy, 6'5", 230-something pounds. He was ranked the number 197 ranked player according to 247 Sports in his class, and he does bring some juice to the position. You couple that with former SMU offensive coordinator Jonathan Brewer, who averaged 38.7 points per game, 454 yards of total offense, and you'll probably be looking at a fairly high-octane offense this year, or at least they'll try. Jacquez Moore returns at running back and is actually the only returning back that rushed for more than 200 yards after Jordan Waters left for also greener pastures when he went to the NC State Wolfpack. Now, I personally thought that Jacquez was a more dangerous running back anyway, so I think they kept their better guy, if you ask me. The Devils also returned Jordan Moore, wide receiver, who tallied 835 yards receiving with 8 touchdowns and will be the presumed star of the offense behind possibly Malik Murphy. And then Malik also has a guy in Eli Pankel at the tight end position who's a reliable option. Interestingly enough, Duke is in a very similar situation in reference to the offensive line as the Heels because most of their starters are stinking gone. More than half of their offensive linemen are underclassmen. And then you go to the other side of the football, all 4 starters are gone from Duke's defensive line in 2023, either to the NFL or the transfer portal. The linebacker core is pretty thin, and the secondary came up with 10 INTs last year, so that's actually kind of a plus. Joshua Pickett and Chandler Rivers are capable corners, and the safeties are fairly decent as well. And then Jalen Stinson, who was a safety, he was second on the team with 88 tackles. So secondary is kind of, one of the strong suits of this Duke defense, but there's a lot of question marks in that front 7. So despite the lack of experience and depth, Manny is known as a defensive guy, obviously, so expect that they will be sound enough to make up for some of the lack of skill that you're going to have an issue with when you're recruiting to Duke. So let's get into this thing. Duke starts their season off with the mighty Elon Phoenix at Wallace Wade Stadium on August 30th. Now, Elon was 6-5, 6-2 in conference in the CAA last year. And Elon is a talented FCS team that has found itself in many sports writers' preseason FCS top 25. They've got returning All-American safety Caleb Curtin, along with Khalil Baker, who spent 4 years at North Carolina Central, and he was named a 2022 All-American with the AP poll. Quarterback Matthew Downing averaged 294 yards passing over the final 4 games of the season. Dude had 12 touchdown passes and no interceptions, so he finished last year off strong. But there's not going to be upsets over here in week 1. Duke gets the job done, but I bet you this one is actually a little bit closer than the experts think. They start the season 1-0, though. We'll have Duke moving to 1-0 on this season. Moving on, Duke takes a trip to Illinois to take on the Northwestern Wildcats out in Big Ten country. I mean, this is must-see TV, people. The Wildcats will once again have a new quarterback under center as they bring in senior Mike Wright, who spent his first 4 seasons at Vanderbilt and Mississippi State. The kid is plus at utilizing his legs, but he is a career 48.7 PFF grade as a passer. So Northwestern is also going to have a lot of turnover on the offensive line. So it's going to be very interesting to watch the Devils and Cats youth in the trenches and who can get the upper hand. A lot of unproven guys on both sides of the football. On the other side, Northwestern's a really talented and deep team when it comes to their defense. On the other side, Northwestern is a really talented and deep team on the defensive line. Aiden Hubbard, Carmine Bastone, Jalen Pate, Richie Haggerty. These are all talented guys, and they have a talented group of guys behind them. The backers are thin, though, and they bring back both of their safeties. So this is kind of a tough one to call for me. Northwestern is going to be playing most of their home games at an on-campus field that's like right beside Lake Michigan, while their original home field is being rebuilt. Now, I've heard that it might seat like 15,000 people. Don't quote me on that, but that would be, unbelievably small. There's more people that come to Carolina home basketball games than would possibly be going to Northwestern football games, which that doesn't surprise me either. But Duke beat the brakes off of them last year, 38-14 in Durham, and they returned some key pieces. So I'll take the Blue Devils in this one close, real close. Duke moves to 2-0 to start the Manny era. Then Duke faces the UConn Huskies in Durham. Head coach Jim Moore has already won more games in 2 years than the previous coach had in 4. Remember when Donald Brown was there? I mean, it seems like that was forever ago when that was a competent top 25 program, and now it's just like, who the heck is UConn? Joe Fagnano comes over from FCS Maine, and he'll battle it out with Wisconsin transfer Nick Evers for the recently departed Taquan Roberson at the quarterback position. UConn is going to be replacing some of their better playmakers in 2023, and I just don't see them having enough in the tank to beat an ACC team. Yes, even the lowly Dukies. Duke actually moves to 3-0 on the season, and everybody's feeling really good about the Manny Diaz hire. Next is an interesting matchup in that the Dukies travel to take on the Middle Tennessee State Raiders in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Now, MTSU brings back dual threat quarterback Nicholas Vadiato, who passed for over 3,000 yards and 28 touchdowns, along with 397 rushing yards. Leading rusher Jaden Creedle and leading receiver tight end Holden Willis also return. Now, call me crazy, but with North Carolina looming, I think the Devils are on upset alert here, and they get caught looking ahead. This is the first, speed bump in the Manny Diaz era. In a game that a lot of people will probably say they should win that football game, they're going to drop it. I'm going to take a bad MTSU team to upset the Devils and move them to 3-1 on the season. And then comes the battle for the victory bell at Wallace Wade Stadium. The Hills come in having won the last 5 against Duke and 7 of the last 10. Preseason All-American Omarion Hampton is going to have a field day against that Duke front 7. Him, Darwin Barlow, throw in Caleb Hood in there. The UNC defense gives Malik Murphy issues, and Manny Diaz and the Duke Blue Devils will actually feel the talent gap in this football game. This game tends to be closer than it should, but with Elko gone and what I think has to be a statement year for the University of North Carolina, Carolina wins rather convincingly, moving the Devils to 3-2, 0-1 in the ACC. Following another loss to the team in the better shade of blue, Duke has little time to feel sorry for itself as it visits the ATL and a really good Georgia Tech team. Haynes King to Eric Singleton Jr. is going to be electric. Throw Malik Rutherford in the mix with one of the best offensive lines in the conference out in front of Jamal Haynes, and the Georgia Tech offense is going to be scary. I'm telling you, man, it's going to be must-see TV watching that Georgia Tech offense go to work. Duke can't keep up with the fireworks that Bobby Dodd and Duke moves to 3-3, 0-2 in the Atlantic Coast Conference. And if this start doesn't get Manny Diaz start to think, what in the world did I get myself into? In comes the reigning Atlantic Coast Conference champions, Florida State. Now, obviously they replaced quarterback Jordan Travis, leading rusher Trey Benson, and top receivers Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson. DJU was the guy that is going to be given the reins to this team. He's got a ton of senior wide receivers, including Kentron Poitier, Malik Benson, and Ja'Kai Douglas. Norvell was also really good in the transfer portal, and FSU is just a more talented team. There's no way the Dukies pull off a Clemson-esque upset here. Duke falls to 3-4, 0-3 in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Duke will then look to rebound against ACC newcomer SMU in Durham. SMU returns 8 starters on offense and 6 starters on defense, to include starting quarterback Preston Stone, who threw for 28 touchdowns. There isn't much question about SMU at the skill position. The thing that I think is going to be the growing pains for this Mustang team competing in the ACC is competing in the trenches. I'm not completely sold on this team like so many people are. And I think you can look at their bowl loss to the lower to middle of the pack ACC team, Boston College, last year, 23-14. I actually think the Devils surprised some people here. Not me, but some people. And they get a W against the new guys. That's right, Duke, and an upset, moving Satan to 4-4, 1-3, and the Atlantic Coast Conference. So Duke is feeling a little good about itself. A little bounce back after a tough stretch. Well, don't get too excited. A trip to South Beach to take on a talented Miami Hurricanes team is up next. Manny going down to his own stomping grounds. And what would be more hilarious than watching Diaz stick it to Mario Cristobal and Hurricane Nation? And then we all woke up. Not this year, Manny. I'm sure he'll have the boys fired up and ready to go to war for their coach. But Miami is going to be tough, even in front of the 5,000 fans that will come to watch this football game. Duke moves to 4-5, 1-4 in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Then the Dukies get another rivalry game as they head over to Raleigh and take on the Wolf Sack. Manny knows that he needs a statement win, and after already losing to the Heels earlier in the season, he would love nothing more than to get a W against a fairly decent NC State team in Raleigh. But there's just too big of a talent gap here after all that the Devils lost. There's no one on Duke's roster that can cover KC Concepcion, and Jordan Waters is going to have a big game with that depleted Duke defensive line. State probably rolls in this one, moving the Dukies to 4-6, 1-5 in the conference. Then Virginia Tech comes into Durham after a week off following their battle with the Clemson Tigers. Virginia Tech returns all 11 starters on offense, including quarterback Kyron Drones and running back Bayshul Tutton. 863 yards and 10 touchdowns from that kid last year. Lots of upperclassmen at all levels, and that defense should be pretty good. I'm not so sure, though, that Virginia Tech as a team is as good as the media pundits are trying to make them out to be. Everybody's just praying and hoping for this Virginia Tech resurgence. But they're too talented for the Dukies. The Blue Devils go to 4-7 after dropping it to Virginia Tech, 1-6 in the conference. And then they round it out with a real zinger. The Dukies travel all the way to Winston-Salem, and they take on the Demon Deacons of Wake Forest. The Deacons bring in Hank Backmeyer, who has thrown for over 8,500 yards in 5 seasons at Boise State and La Tech. Desmond Claiborne is a really good running back, and Taylor Morin is a more than capable receiver. Now, Dave Clawson will be looking for a bounce-back season, considering the Deacs went 4-8, 1-7 last year. But I don't really see much from this roster that leads me to believe they're going to be drastically improved. This game is about as close to a push as possible. And I think Manny is able to get the Devils fired up enough, knowing that they aren't going bowling, to win their last game of the season in a tight one. Duke finishes the season 5-7, 2-6, coming back down to earth a little bit from that 8-5, 4-4 campaign the Dukies had in 2023. Now, the Manny Diaz hire will be much like the Elko hire. The question really will be, is there any way he can actually generate the same kind of buzz that Mike had? And that buzz was still this big. He's 21-15. Well, I take that back. After the Clemson W last year in week 1, everybody was kind of getting on that Duke train, and then they came back down to earth, especially after Riley Leonard got injured. Now, Manny is 21-15 in his career, which was obviously his time at Miami. Can he succeed at Duke? I doubt it. If you're a Dookie, I would expect that you just enjoyed your window. It's going to be back to 6-7 wins and a bowl trip, considered a successful season. And Manny will be gone in 3 years or less. It's Duke, a stepping stone to another head coach job. So let me know what you think about my puke Blue Devils prediction, College Football Nation. Am I just being a stinking hater, or am I onto something? If you haven't already, like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and we will catch you on the next one, baby.
I'm a Tar Heel!